Chris here with Learn Mograph, and today we're going to be covering my top 5 favorite plugins for speeding up my workflow in After Effects. Let's jump right into it. First up in our top 5 After Effects workflow plugins is Motion by Mograph. There's so much that this plugin can do. We'll cover a few of the things that it can do in this video, but in a later video we're going to take a deeper dive into every single thing that this plugin can do. So the very first thing that I use on almost every project is this anchor point repositioning tool. We'll just draw a shape layer here. When you create a shape layer on your canvas, it automatically puts the anchor point in the middle of the composition. So if we just take our shape and we drag it into the center of the composition here, we can use these 9 dots here to kind of reposition it based on the actual dimensions of the layer that we just created. So we can do the center, we can do a left edge, top edge, or any of the corner pieces, and that changes the anchor point on where this will rotate and where this will scale from. The next thing that Motion has is this handy little graph right here, which is our curve graph. So right now we have these 2 linear keyframes that are animating this circle to scale from 0 to 100%. And to get a better idea of what this can do, we'll hop into our graph editor by hitting Shift F3 on our keyboard, and we'll select these 2 keyframes. You can see right now that they're linear. And this graph right here corresponds directly to these 2 sliders down the bottom here. We can actually hop in here and really control the easing so we can quickly create these really nice curves in our graphs. This also gives you a lot of other ways to control your keyframes right within the Motion window. So with the click of a button, you can convert your keyframes to Auto Bezier, Linear, or Hold. Moving down our Motion window, we have these 3 buttons right here. This one right here gives you a one-click access to change anything about your composition. So we can quickly change our dimensions, we can quickly change our frame rate, and if we scroll down a little bit here, we can change the duration of our composition. It also gives us control of the timeline. So here we have kind of a vectorized version of our timeline, and we can quickly adjust our work area, and you can see that it's dynamically adjusting down in our timeline, and we can scrub using the current timecode indicator right within the Motion window. The next option we have in Motion is called Animo, which is a really cool tool that can take a whole bunch of keyframes that you've assigned to different properties on an animation and convert them into a single keyframe controlled by expressions. So right now we have keyframes on our roundness, exposition, scale, and rotation of this layer. And they're all staggered at different intervals in time, and it's creating this sort of looping motion where it goes all the way out and all the way back. And if we want to adjust these, we can lasso them all together, and we can hold Option and drag and create and scale them proportionally. But that's kind of a pain, and you have to make sure that you lasso them, and sometimes you can miss, and it doesn't always work as you'd expect when you're trying to work quickly. So with Animo, all we have to do is lasso to select all of our properties, click Animo, and it's going to choose keyframes, and it's going to shy the original layer. And we're just going to click Run Animo. And what this does is create a single layer controlled by a null. And if we tap U on our keyboard to ripple down our property values, it just creates this one slider animation that drives all of the other animation. And we can use that to extend our animation, make it quicker, and it maintains the proportional value of all those keyframes that we had originally. Next up in our Motion window is our delay option. We have these 7 balls scattered across the screen. Right now we just have one animated to go up and down. So what we can do is select our first layer here, hit U on our keyboard and select Y position, and then shift and select the rest of your layers here. We click delay and run delay. And this does some work in the background. And now we have our single guide layer of the original. If we hit play, we can see that all of the others are delayed based on the original. And to see what this did, we can unshy our layers, and we can hop into our pre-comp here, and we can see that it's added expressions to all of the different values that need to be changed. And this makes it really easy to create some really cool animations with just a handful of keyframes. This next feature of Motion is really cool if you need to change a property for a whole bunch of layers all at once. So here we have all different shape layers, and they're all different sizes. And let's say we want to scale them all up at the same time. Well, we could just tap S on our keyboard to bring up the scale property, select all of them, and then drag to scale them up or down. But with motion, we can open up our first property, select scale, shift to select all of our layers, and we're going to click grab. And now we just take our first property and we can scale it up or down, and that affects all of the different layers. This next tool is super useful and I use it all of the time. So instead of hitting a keyboard shortcut to create a null for our controller, you just click the null button and it automatically creates a null and it centers the anchor point right in the middle of it. I know After Effects default null, if we do the keyboard shortcut for it, defaults the null to have the anchor point in the top left. But I found myself changing the anchor point and then repositioning it all the time, and this just makes it really easy to create a null with a centered anchor point right in the middle of your composition. This next feature of motion is pretty cool. So here we have a sphere, and motion comes with a whole bunch of pre-built textures for you to use. So we'll go down, we'll select maybe this one right here, and we'll just click Run Texture, and we automatically have a texture applied here. And this makes it really easy to take your shape layer here and it adds a effect on here called texture. So you can quickly change the position of your texture. You can change the scale and you can rotate your texture. And if we unlock our texture layer, we can click our pre-compose texture and we can change the blending mode to something like maybe multiply and change the opacity so it's a little bit more subtle. This next tool I've been using for probably the better part of a decade, and it's a much older plugin, but it's something that I use a lot when working with animated typography or just trying to create interesting ways for text to come on screen without having to use the built-in presets that are in the After Effects presets library. This is called Decompose Text. It's by Nab, and you can get it on aescripts.com. It's a name your own price, so I'm sure the developer would appreciate it if you paid a little bit for the value that it brings to you. And it's a very simple plugin, just has a couple options here. It can take text and break it into characters, into lines, and into words. So in this example, we have 3 layers. We've already added some animations here. It's just gonna slide from the bottom and fade in, and then slide up top and fade out. To see what this plugin does, we'll just hide these first 2 layers, lines and words. We'll focus on characters. And we're going to decompose into characters, and we're going to do original position using expressions. And we're going to click decompose. And we're going to give this a minute to run because there's a lot of characters in that paragraph. And what that does is break your text layer into different layers for each and every character that was in that paragraph. Now we can take all of our letters here, hold Option, right bracket, right click, go to Keyframe Assistant, Sequence Layers, go to the end of our timeline and hit the Option right bracket. So what this did was create an offset animation so our letters all fade in one by one. And then they rest in the middle for a second, and then they all start to fade out one by one. And we're just going to click all of our layers and we're going to hit delete because it maintains our original layer down the bottom here. Same thing by words, you can select your words, change this to decompose into words and then decompose. Didn't create quite as many layers. So we can do the same thing here. Select the top, select the bottom, Option right click, Option right bracket, right click, Keyframe Assistant, Sequence Layers. Go to the end, Option right bracket. And now we have it fading in word by word. And then by lines, which is probably the most reasonable for this size paragraph, click decompose, and these we can just kind of offset manually because there's only 3 lines. Again, it's a pretty simple plugin, but it's very, very useful when you're trying to create really dynamic text animations really quickly. Our next plugin is called Explode Shape Layers, and this is super handy if you're working with Illustrator files that you've brought in or really complex shape layers that are all contained within one group within After Effects. So here we have an example where we have a house. You might recognize this house from our top 5 keyboard shortcuts video, but we can take this first layer here and we're going to hide the rest of these and shy them so we can just focus on this. So we go over to our Explode Shape Layers panel, and we have this AI to shape layer. You just give that a click, and it automatically creates it, and it maintains the same color label that we've had originally. So if you're big into color coding your After Effects timelines, this won't mess up your color coding. So we can automatically create shapes from vector layer. But what if we want to take that a step further? Well, we can click this button here, and that gives us a different layer for each and every element that was in this original shape layer. It also works in reverse. So if we want to make our changes and put these all back, we can select the tool next to it, which is Merge Selected Layers. And that brings them all back into a single merge shape layer. We also have these other two tools over here, which are Select All Fills and Select All Strokes. We don't have any strokes on this particular shape, so we're going to click the Select All Fills. And this just gives us an easy way to go in and change the color of all of the different elements that are in this single shape layer. And there's quite a lot of them, so to twirl down each one of these and access the fill would be quite a pain. Our next tool here is very useful if you're trying to sync audio across a whole bunch of different compositions. This is a client project that I worked on a couple years ago. And here we have our audio layer. I've pre-composed it because I did a lot of edits to it. And we want this audio layer to flow into all of our different compositions down here. So when we make changes within those compositions, we're still lining them up to the right time. Normally you can copy and paste this layer and bring it into your different pre-comps and make sure that it's synced up that way. But with the click of a button, we can go over to our Universal Audio panel here. And we're going to select our pre-comp for the audio. And we're going to click this button that says Make Selected Audio Layers Universal. And what that does is takes your audio layer here and adds it into each and every one of your pre-comps. So if we go into this one, we can see that it's all lined up in there. And the really cool thing about this is you can take your pre-comp of audio right here and you can actually make edits to it. So say we wanted to add a space right there and then just click the Refresh Universal Audio. Now when we hop into our pre-comps, we have that space in there so we can maintain that sync across as many compositions deep as we need to go. This next tool changed the way that I work between Illustrator and After Effects forever. It's called Overlord. It's by Battle Axe. It's an extremely useful plugin if you're doing a lot of work between Illustrator and After Effects. So we're going to go back to our house scene here, and we have most of it in After Effects already. But let's say that we wanted to add these two trees from Illustrator. And the normal way to do this would be to break it out into a different layer, save out your Illustrator file, bring it into After Effects, drag the trees in and line them up exactly where they need to go. But Overlord makes it really easy to just select our trees, select these two here, and Overlord gives you an option within Illustrator and After Effects that give you the same exact options. So what we want to do here is select our two trees, go to our Overlord panel, and push selection to AE. And that automatically drops your trees exactly into the composition that you have open within After Effects. It also kind of works in reverse. So if we wanted to take this shape tool here and we wanted to bring it down here and add a big block on the ground, we can take our shape layer here and use this option, which is push selection to AI from within After Effects. And that brings that shape layer directly into Illustrator, right where you had left it in After Effects. The other cool thing it does for working between Illustrator and After Effects is that it brings these in as already editable shape layers. So if we hop back into After Effects here by clicking our Switch to AE button, and let's say we get rid of the rest of our scene here, but we want to bring in the scene from Illustrator. We'll hop back into Illustrator. We'll select all of our shapes here. We'll deselect our trees and our cube because we already have those in there. And we're going to select Push to AE. And what that does is rebuild our entire Illustrator composition as shape layers right within After Effects. So they're immediately editable and we don't have to go in and convert them using something like Explode Shape Layers or right-clicking and create shapes from vector layers. That wraps up my top 5 favorite workflow enhancing plugins for After Effects. I'll leave links below in the description where you can buy any of these plugins. I'm not sponsored or affiliated with any of these companies at all. I just wanted to promote some great tools that I actually use and believe in. I hope you found this content useful, and be sure to check out the links in the description for more workflow tips in our After Effects workflow series, only on learnmograph.com. I'll see you in the next video.